carrying only the absolute essentials. Modest timepiece and travel piano.
Starting off right. Goofy humor, but somehow grounded. Well played.
But the bear saved my life.
Saving that guy who was going to kill your wife. What a great way to introduce the bears. The smaller aspect ratio in black and white eases us into full CG bears interacting with humans and the world.
Done. Good Lord. Now try Stratford upon Avon.
I know it's probably just commonplace for you friends across the pond, but for us Americans, bears attempting proper English with those accents just adds to the hilarity. Although, on the note of easing us in, the CGI is so amazing we didn't need much easing into the cutest anthropomorphized bear cub ever dreamt up.
There's no need to rush.
Irony. When Professor Dumbledore and Dolores Umbridge put their heads together, you get Rube Goldberg marmalade-making machines.
Embarrassing. But tasty.
Silver linings.
Real brolly buster, isn't it?
See what I mean? I've never heard that expression, therefore I giggle. From marmalade sandwiches to earthquakes. That escalated quickly, but I appreciate getting the story going. Inspired choice to use a handheld camera in this scene to add to the destruction and sorrow. See, I knew there was a connection. Here's your tie into Christopher Robin. Clever match-cut transitions showing the passage of time with an appropriately exaggerated amount of marmalade. Classiest fart joke that I ever did see. Here.
Good morning. Really tipping it down, isn't it? Oh, strange.
Our judgy eyes are directed at you Londoners, but we can all take the message to heart. People across the whole world used to be nicer. Shots like this with Paddington backlit by the doorway behind him with a flat angle center frame are what make this so much more than just a kid's movie.
You hungry? But this is all I've got left, and it's really just for emergency.
Chekhov's sandwich as well as Chekhov's pigeons.
And it was fine until you jumped in the lake.
It's a Victorian bathing pond, darling. It's what you're supposed to do.
Not naked.
Well, forgot my costumes.
Well, when you see an amphibian man in the water, there's no time to worry about swim costumes.
Keep your eyes down. There's some sort of bear over there. Probably selling something.
I wasn't sure. There was no way to know, but I do love a world where a bear in a hat isn't scary because it's a bear, only because it may solicit you.
Good evening.
No, thank you.
Politeness.
Oh, hello.
Ha! Good stuff. He's no longer lost whether the Browns want to admit it or not. Word for word from the book, some things just don't need one bit changed.
Mr. Brown, that is extremely rude.
Bear language lessons. And that's the moment that Paddington became a wife win. She could no longer contain her glee. And honestly, I agree. Serendipity?
Paddington? Oh, sorry.
Ha! So several wins here. First, a sightseeing around London montage is the fastest way to get ripped off by your cabbie. But for the purposes of the movie, I love that they snuck in a cliche sightseeing montage with a lampshading for Mr. Brown and acknowledgement from the cabbie that he was sort of ripping them off.
What sort of route do you call that? Said it was his first time in London. I thought I'd show him the sights. Should have charged more.
That's right.
Such a simple gag of him biting into the ketchup bottle to proclaim,
"That's not ripe."
To then happily find that the apple is indeed ripe. It all plays into how innocent and trusting Paddington is, right down to his next line.
This will suit me down to the ground. But not you.
No, we don't do that.
Well, Lord Grantham, you'd never do it anyway. It would probably fall to Mrs. Hughes.
Like an orphanage.
No, not an orphanage. Institution for young souls whose parents have sadly passed on.
A visual representation of a rose by any other name.
Okay. Oh, going that way. Got it.
Advantages of always being barefoot.
Grizzly? Not particularly. Mind you, I haven't seen him in the mornings.
Oh, I gave up being surprised when they came out with the microwave oven.
I would have thought being able to make dishes wash themselves would be your threshold. But, I mean, besides the fact that a family of 4 only has 2 toothbrushes, maybe the kids have their own bathroom. It's your own fault for not keeping them in the same cup and displaying them like they're ear cleaners.
Thank you for holding. Your call is
Moderately
important to us.
Honesty. But this is where I fell in love. So as unbelievable as a bathroom being so watertight it fills up with water, the mat does clog up underneath the door to help us buy it. This is an escalation of what happens in the book. Never gonna knock a little artistic license when it results in a bear riding a tub down the stairs. Another amazing piece of evidence of the effort put into this kids' film. And I know, Life Aquatic, but Hereditary borrowed this setup almost exactly. Ursin or Ursine or Ursine means relating to bears. So there's your CinemaWins zoological lesson of the week. Another awesome, unneeded, but wholly appreciated detail of a time-lapse painting.
Judy suffers from a serious condition called embarrassment.
I really enjoyed that this entire film is generally presented through Paddington's eyes. Even the other main characters are introduced through Paddington's perspective, which isn't just a narration cheat, it's actually a letter to his aunt. Ha! So, I'm not 100% sure what she's doing with the torch, maybe cutting off a bent bolt or loosening a nut, but more importantly, I thought the legs missing was a continuity error, but here she is reattaching them. They must have broken off on the stairs. I just have to again point out the insane level of detail in Paddington's face. Absolutely astounding. Interesting distinction between hunters and explorers. It's the body.
Is he endangered?
He is now.
Subtlety.
All I was trying to do was wash my face.
Cleanliness. Another out of place in a kid's movie film technique. A long take that's perfectly timed to hit each character as the camera spins around the room. And it beautifully leads into a Dutch tilt to introduce our secondary antagonist, the main bad guy from the cartoon and probably books, Mr. Curry. Oh, I bet that's unbearable. Simple sign reading gags that work. It works really well, like a Drew Gooden joke taken to the next level. I don't think this is supposed to make me as uncomfortable as it does, but all that fur on the edge of the escalator? Still, the image of each stair hitting Paddington in the butt gives me a chuckle. So, is this trip to Notting Hill the reason Hugh Grant was cast in the next one? Is it just Harry Potter and Paddington, or is everything in London just filled to the brim with whimsy? Or maybe it's just because of Slughorn?
Gentleman dropped his wallet!
One huge thing I have to give this film credit for is not kidding up Paddington's character, like making him loud and obnoxious. He's still just as humble, polite, and mild-mannered as he should be. And it's exactly that personality that gets him into the hijinks that are fun to watch. He wants to freshen up, to fit in and do the proper thing, and now his citizen arrest of a thief happens just because he's trying to do a good deed. Bam Marbera? Or B-Rod? Tony Bear?
Some kind of tiny police bear.
Dirty Barry? Okay, that's it.
In 100 yards, bear left.
Ha! Yep, he's on your left.
Shakespeare's most famous stage direction, exits pursued by...
Paddington.
A joke pun you'll only get if you paid attention in English class. Maybe this is what Shakespeare was talking about. That's a headline worthy of Leslie Knope. Also, all of the articles, from what we can see, are actually related to the headlines and don't repeat.
Not gonna let this change us, right?
No way, baby! Could you be careful? There's a baby here. Could you step back? There's a baby coming through.
Now that's a realistic and accurate portrayal of fatherhood.
Where's the bike, darling?
This is our new car.
What?
They're screaming!
No, darling, that's the sound of laughter.
Children lessons.
Wind, hot wind, too hot wind.
Astute observations. And the look is complete. I really love how they gave each of the defining Paddington adornments and story staples a pertinent and memorable origin. The hat being from the Explorer, handed down from his deceased uncle, and then becomes the reason they learn about the Explorer. The marmalade is also from the Explorer and is a happy memory from spending time with his aunt and uncle. And now his coat is passed down from his new family. The cabbie's license plate is Cabby. Again, I ask, is all of London filled with amazing complex contraptions, or is it just because Molly Weasley is mucking around?
It's called a hard stare.
A good way to remind a friend of politeness.
You look very pretty.
That's what they'll say in jail.
You know, because people are very complimentary in jail. Also, compliments. I like the character consistency of having Millicent being willing to touch the dead insects, and she's not disturbed by death.
If you ever make it to London, you can be sure of a very warm welcome.
What a beautiful way to skip past the movie we've already seen while letting us feel what Paddington is experiencing seeing his original home for the first time in a while.
Today, I saw a film the Explorer made of darkest Peru.
And let's take a moment to enjoy how beautiful and soothing Ben Wishaw's voice is. I once said Patrick Stewart's voice was like honey in the ear. Well, Ben's is like, well, marmalade.
And after, I wondered if you'd like to celebrate by dining with me. I have some meat paste sandwiches and pickles.
Meat paste sandwiches and pickles. Comeuppance, even if it's not long-lasting. Generosity. One more artistic way of visual exposition done more artistically than anyone expects. Ha! Like how a taxi you get a massage in should be a relaxy taxi or the superior relaxicab. It's a cab that brings you to get stuffed. A taxidermist. Okay, I know it's not any different, but you guys are with me.
I found these tied to a lamppost and I thought, waste not, want not.
Conservation. The birds shadowing. Hitchcock birds, that is.
Charles Darwin brought the giant tortoise from the Galapagos.
Good evening.
One last twinge of pity, but also another charmful display of Paddington's innocence as he may not realize that the animals are stuffed.
I'm going to stuff you, Bear.
You might be thinking, why not restrain him or dart him before revealing your evil plan? But seems like in addition to Explorer, she really embraced the hunter side. So she wouldn't want it to be too easy. Also, when you've got anti-stormtrooper aim, I swear I've seen this in a Saw film. Oh wait, it was Mission Impossible. And obviously Ingenuity. That he picked up earlier.
That's not pipes. That's bear.
It's at this point in the story that we learn Paddington has had a positive effect on everyone in the story, either directly or indirectly. He encourages Jonathan's science experiments, teaches Judy bear speak, and through the love that he's shown the Browns is part of putting Mr. Brown into a situation to step outside his comfort zone, which in turn helps Mrs. Brown find her hero. I thought it was a Stealing the Knock List homage. Turns out it was the Burj Khalifa. More importantly, it leads to Paddington leaving scratches on the metal, something that again wasn't required, but they did it anyway. Thankfully, the Toy Story 3 homage was cut short. The Browns to the rescue. Well, it was an emergency, and those pigeons finally got their sandwich. Mrs. Bird to the rescue. You know, after the birds failed. Also hugging.
And just one sandwich contains all the vitamins and minerals a bear needs for the whole day.
Does that mean I don't have to eat vegetables?
He said bear, not boy.
Human nutrition lessons.
Every home should have a marmalade day.
And a bear.
Especially a bear.
Who spilled water all over my keyboard? But let's be honest. While Coco sort of wrings the tears out of your face, Paddington's realization that he's home, that his heart caught up to his body, as Mr. Gruber put it.
My body had traveled very fast, but my heart, she took a little longer to arrive.
Puts a smile on your face that's hard to wipe away.
I even met the explorer's daughter, but she tried to stuff me. So Mrs. Bird threw her off a roof.
Succinct storytelling. Also more comeuppance. I realize for some people not ending in the spring feels a little melancholy, but for the select few of us that love winter, it makes me feel right at home. This wasn't the movie I thought it would be, at all. And you know how I feel about animated movies, even ones targeted at children, especially with the way DreamWorks, Disney, and the current masters, Pixar, make them these days. But to me, Paddington seemed like a movie targeted at kids for kids. And, at least in the US, I think a lot of us assumed it was another garbage talking CGI animal movie with lots of toilet humor and pop references. I was happily surprised to find that Paddington is something completely different. There's quite a bit of quality comedy.
You want to call him Ketchup?
No.
Ketchup the bear?
But even more importantly, a heartwarming message.
This family needed that wee bear every bit as much as he needed you.
Which, like I said, often feels targeted at Londoners, but we can all extrapolate it out for our own purposes. I mean, the first real introduction we get to modern civilization is people being too busy to even notice a talking bear on the platform. One way of looking at the story is that of an immigrant/refugee looking for a new home, and the way in which the modern world perceives them. Mr. and Mrs. Brown each portraying a different side of the argument. While Mr. Brown comes off as a cynical curmudgeon, it would be silly to pretend like every person with a sad story is sincere. And it would also be foolish to ignore the fact that precisely while he was trying to quickly update his homeowner's policy, Paddington was preparing to flood the entire house. And then there's Mrs. Brown, who refuses to assume the worst of anyone. She reaches out to Paddington when the rest of the world had turned a cold shoulder to him. I think there's a balance to be found that this story does well to illustrate. Caution in and of itself isn't necessarily heartless, and unconditional trust can create its own problems. But making your mind up about anyone before you give them a chance is never right. There's this through line sort of below the surface that alludes to an equivalency that might seem oversimplified. But basically, be nice or do the right thing and good things will happen to you and to those around you. We know life isn't always quite like that, but it's something we can strive for nonetheless. Out of all the performances that were great, the real standout to me is actually the director, Paul King. Anyone who has seen The Mighty Boosh knows that this genre is not his usual fare, though it seems like it might be going forward. He adapted some styles from other filmmakers, a lot of flat-angle center framing like Wes Anderson, a few Fincheresque matching velocity and tilt camera movements, even some Edgar Wright quick-cutting accentuated sound effects montages. I know that these are all things filmmakers employ at one time or another, but there's a crispness to it in this film that I didn't expect, to the point that certain well-done shots and compositions stuck out to me. One of the most interesting things to me is that for a children's story, we don't spend a whole lot of time with the children, with the exception of Paddington himself. Really, the main character arc is reserved for Mr. Brown. We don't get to know anyone as well as we do him.
7% of childhood accidents start with jumping. 34% of pre-breakfast accidents involve banisters.
Having a bear in the house increases the chances of major disaster by 4,000%.
The big caper scene in one of the most on-the-nose comedic sequences is Mr. Brown dressed up like a female maid trying to convince Hamilton Cork his arm is fake.
Mr. Brown dressed up as a lady.
And his turn to accept Paddington after seeing the effect he has on his family is moving. One last thing I love about this film is that it's not slavishly devoted to realism when bringing the story to life. It's London, but a magically augmented London. Murals change depending on the mood, bears can achieve flight with the help of umbrellas, cast iron clawfoot tubs make fantastic boats, and... oh, right, bears talk.
Coming down in stair rods, isn't it?
It's a world filled with wonder and spectacle with no real explanation. It sort of writes its own rules as the story progresses, but allows for as much tension as you'd expect in a children's story. It works. This is truly a masterclass on how to adapt a children's book. And there are quite a few people that think the second one is even better. But next week, we're going to a different world with different kinds of magic. So I'll see you all next week.
Do you like a wee nip of antifreeze for the old pacemaker? Go!
I give up.